Gini. I've been painting for over 40 years, and I use the wet into wet or alla prima method, and I want to share with you what I have learned. You can oil paint too, so let's have some fun. Hello, today we're going to be painting copper and lace hydrangeas. This is a copper pot sitting on a lace table cover, tablecloth, and the pot is filled with hydrangeas. They're kind of a pinkish, orangish color. And this one can be painted on a black canvas or a white canvas. I'm going to use a white canvas today, and the instructions are pretty much the same. The only thing is with the black canvas you don't have to paint in as much dark because the dark is already on the canvas for you, so there is an advantage to doing that. I'm going to start with a 3/4 inch flat brush. I have my canvas prepared with the pattern, and I have a thin even coat of a liquid medium on there. I'm using safflower oil with a little bit of alkyd dryer in it. I'm going to start with a 3/4 inch brush. I have on my palette, I have titanium white, Naples yellow, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, cadmium orange, cadmium red, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, Prussian blue, sap green, and black. And then I've pre-mixed up some sap green and black with equal amounts of sap green and black to make a very dark green. And then I've also mixed up a little bit of sap green and cad yellow to make a lighter green. And that's going to be some of the highlights on our leaves later. So let's get started with the background. I'm going to start off with the background using that. Oh, and I've also done a premix of Prussian blue and black to get a very dark blue. So I'm going to start up here in the background. I want my background to be really dark. So I'm going to start with the sap green and black. As you can see, it's very dark, and you can vary the amount of pressure and the amount of paint to get this to be lighter green. So you can kind of go with what you want to paint here. Background is pretty much up to you in terms of color. I've had students who like to change the background totally and a totally different color. I'm also going to add, while I'm painting or while I'm doing the background, some of that dark blue mixture just to vary and give it some texture and vary the colors in the background. As I said, if you start off with a black background, this is a little bit faster in terms of the background, but I like to have varying mixtures in my background, and I like for the colors to show up. I'm focusing on the top half of the canvas now, so I've got my camera set for just the top half. That medium that we put on the canvas allows us to mix color right on the canvas and lets our paint go on a lot easier and smoother. And it lets us use a lot less paint. I'll move the camera down here in a minute to show you what I'm doing at the bottom. You see, I'm using little X strokes, literally little X strokes, very quickly. I'm not trying to make the background look like anything in particular, but I really like those strokes showing up there. And I'm going to take this all the way down to the top of the table cover. And you'll notice too that I don't care about I want to get right up next to my flowers, and I don't care about the crossing the lines. Actually, crossing the lines is allowed and encouraged. Now the next thing I'm going to do after I've put all that color on the background is I'm going to take my mop brush and I'm just gently, very, very gently, no pressure at all, going to go up here, and where I see brush strokes that I don't like, I'm just going to gently go over those and just kind of smooth this background a little bit. This helps push the background into the background even more. Very gently. And like I said, you can make this as light or as dark as you want. And we'll play with that some more later if we want. I'm going to take a mop brush, my mop brush, and just wipe off the excess paint off of it. I want to work on the table cover. Now the table cover, we want it to kind of disappear back in here, okay, but we want a little light going behind there. So I'm going to start out with a kind of a pale blue. I'm going to take a little bit of Prussian blue, white, and even a little black in it to kind of gray it down. And I'm just going to start with this color on my table cover. This will just be the underpainting. We'll add other colors in it to get the white of the table cover, and you get the folds and everything showing. But for now, we're just putting in a color. Now I'm going to make the color a little bit darker when we go over the edge here. This part I want to be a little bit darker. As we go over the edge of the table, this will be a little darker. I'm also taking the lines. See, the lines here indicate the folds, so I'm taking a little bit of the darker blue mixture that we made, and I'm putting a little bit of that on those lines because I know that that's going to be where the shadows are, and then I can put this lighter color next to it. Add a little white, get it a little whiter. You see I'm working very loose, very fast. I'm not trying to do any detail yet. This is the underpainting. Just get the basics of that in there. Now I know I have a table underneath of here, so before I do any more of the lace down here, I'm going to go ahead and put that table in. And I'm going to take black and burnt sienna, and I'm just going to start with a dark brown right here is my table. Keep that nice and dark. I'm going to use that dark right along the edges of my lace down here and right back in here. Very dark. Might even add some dark blue, black, burnt sienna, because I know that this is going to be very dark. On this corner. A little burnt sienna to keep it on the browner tone. Now if you had a black canvas, this would be dark already, and you really wouldn't have to do a whole lot with it unless you just wanted to add a little bit of the brown burnt sienna tone to it. Want this to be dark on this corner as well. If you wanted to add an edge to your table, you could, but just keep in mind that underneath of the edge would be darker than what's above the edge. You see, very loose, very free. I don't care about it getting up into my lace on my lines. Wiping my brush off, I'm going to go back in on my table cover, and I'm going to think about the way the light is hitting. The light is coming from the top right, so I'm going to think about how it might affect all this back in here and on the rest of the table cover. I'm also going to smooth out the edges between my table cover and my background right here. Just almost letting that disappear right back there. That just adds more depth to our painting. Kind of keeps us from having to deal with whatever's going on back there in that background and around that edge as well. Okay? So I'm going to take a little bit of white right on the tip of my brush. I can pick up a little tiny bit of Prussian blue, but for the most part I want this to be white. And I'm going to think about, there's kind of like a little bit of a bit of light right back here, coming right across here. So I want to add that in. A little bit of white mixing right in with my blue that I have up there. Letting that fade off there. Then maybe there's a wrinkle in the table cover right there. Add a little height to that. Maybe the table cover is kind of wrinkled up a little bit, so I'm going to just put in a little bit of white. Down through here, you've got lines. It's kind of showing you where to put these. But the idea here is just to give the indication of a little bit of wrinkle. Well, right before I get started on the rest of the table cover, right along the base, right there, I'm going to take my dark blue mixture and a little bit right in here where that is kind of wrinkled up there. I'm going to put in a little bit of dark right there. And then over here on this side, I know that the shadow is going to be hitting over here. Put a little bit of that and pull that out. That's the shadow. Even pick up a little bit of alizarin crimson in there just to give that shadow a little bit of a glow. Maybe some burnt sienna. because there's going to be some glow coming off of that pot, adding a little extra color in there helps that. Then along the edge of the table, I'm going to go back in here, wipe my brush, go back in here with white right along the edge of that table to emphasize that's the edge of the table before it falls over. Soften this edge back here. I don't want that to be a definite edge, just kind of the indication. A couple of times, add some white right there. Okay? Again, taking white, idea of these wrinkles up here is that the table cover is wrinkled and then it kind of comes down and it goes over the edge where our folds are right here. And the table on the top here is a little bit lighter right there. So I can put a little lighter brown, little burnt sienna and white. We'll brush in there, give us a little grain, little wood grain if we want on the edge. Now if there is an edge right here on the table, there's going to be a little bit of a glow of white coming around this side of the table, or on this side of the pot. So I want to put that in. Emphasize that dark area there a little bit more. Okay, the folds that come down, again, I'm going to take some white, go right on the top of that fold, and then just let it fade into the dark. See, the line comes there, this wrinkle comes here, and then it kind of falls over the edge and then fades out into our darker blue. And you can make these darker or lighter. We definitely want a line between the light and the dark. See, that is giving us the idea that this is shadowed area. This area right here is a little darker. This area over here is kind of just hiked up a little bit. Has some darker in there. Now right down along the base right here, I'm going to put even darker. If you had a black canvas, you might not have to do this. Just taking a little black and just kind of emphasizing that edge. This edge is where this edge is where the seam is going to be for our lacy edge. So I'm just adding a little bit of a dark emphasis there. Wipe my brush, go back and re-emphasize those edges of the lace as it comes over right there. And that top edge right there. Now, let's talk about this lace down here in the bottom. First, I'm going to go back in with my pretty much the same colors that I started out with on the top, and I'm just going to quickly lay this light gray color in there. And you'll notice that I'm kind of pulling up some of the brown, letting the brown kind of come right up and mix along that edge. That's because I want a little bit of that brown in my color, because this lace is see-through. So we want to be able to see through it. And to do that, if we add a little bit of it into our color up here, we're gonna be able to see a little bit of that when we start adding our highlights to our lace. A little bit over here. Now we have to add the shadows. The shadows are going to be in the lace just as they were in the rest of the tablecloth above it. So I'm looking to see where this shadow comes. There's going to be a shadow down here as well. Light blue, a little bit of black in it. Or dark blue, a little bit of black in it. Just kind of pulling this shadow on down into my lace. Very quickly. See, I didn't fuss with it. Over here our lace is just kind of quirked up a little bit, so we'll just throw in some color right there. Excuse me. Now I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and this line that comes down, I'm going to continue that down a little bit with this as well. Just taking and doing a swipe down so that I can kind of see where my folds are and match them up to what's above there. See, fold, fold. Okay. But I'm pulling that out. Adding a little bit of fluff over here to this lace. Okay, now here, this is the fun part. Lace doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to create individual little lace patterns to make lace look like lace. Okay, I'm going to take my 1/4 inch, it's about 1/4 of an inch wide, it's a number 8 filbert brush, and I'm going to pick up white. First thing I'm going to do is just go up here and I'm going to add that little line that's kind of where the seam between the tablecloth and the lacy part. Just going to kind of put that in. Over here it's just kind of an indication where that might be. A little wrinkly over there. And then I'm going to take that white and I'm going to do kind of like a little brush, and I'm going to go right up here to the edge, and I'm just going to kind of create a little pattern. But I'm only going to do it right on the edge where I know it's brightest, right there. I can take this along the edge, kind of flip it around, start there. I'm kind of thinking flowers, but I'm not trying to do individual flowers along the edge. I'm just going to give it a little extra emphasis along that edge. Okay, that's the white. Up here and work on that edge a little bit. So I'm letting the filbert brush, that edge of the tip of that filbert brush, kind of create. See how I'm twisting and turning? Just the filbert brush, twist, turn. Think about it as being a little bit of a pattern. But it's more of an indication of a pattern, not really trying to create a specific pattern. I mean, if you could get real detailed with this if you wanted to, but it's not necessary to make it look lacy. Over here, just little edges flipped up, maybe over here. Now I'm going to wipe my brush and I'm going to go get some light blue. Well, maybe a mid-tone blue. And I'm going to go back. It's just with a dirty brush and some Prussian blue. I'm going to go back in here next to the dark area and add some dark flowery detail. Right underneath of that edge of white that I put up there for the hem area, I can add a little extra emphasis if I want. Pull that down a little bit, give it a little bit more shadow on one edge. See, now we're getting a little bit more detail in there. I could even add a little bit of alizarin crimson, which gives it even more of a feeling of shadow down in here. Just a dirty brush, alizarin crimson added to my blue, blue brush that I had on there to get a kind of a purpley color. Pull some of that up into these shadows if I wanted to. And I really am not trying to make this look like anything in terms of a pattern in the lace. Loose, loose, loose. Little hints of edges over here is all I'm going to do. And that's really how you make basic lace. I could even take a tiny bit of yellow into my white, right along the top edge to get this a little brighter. Tiny bit of yellow into your white. It almost looks white, but it just adds enough of a hint of a brighter color to highlight that white. Adding a little purple up into some of my shadows up here. And while I'm down into this area, I can take a little bit of black and burnt sienna. I want this to be very dark, right underneath of this edge of my lace. I can go back in here and add a little shadow. Wipe my brush. I really want this to be dark black. Black with some of that dark blue even. Brown. That dark brown to be underneath of this edge. I've got some white on my brush I need to get rid of. There we go. Right along the edge, if I add a little bit more shadow under there, it just makes it look a little bit more three-dimensional. And I can also take some of that dark brown and put occasional hints of that into my lace here to kind of indicate that you can see through this lace and see that table under there. Not too much. I don't want to get this too busy. Dark flips here, kind of shows that that's kind of flipping up there. Little dark shadow along here. Kind of shows that there's a shadow being thrown by this edge there. Okay, that's our table cover. I might add a little bit more light right over here. Thin that little line under the pot a little bit. little brighter right there and right there. Okay, that's our table cover. Okay, next we're going to work on our copper pot. I'm going to continue using my 1/4 inch filbert brush, the number 8, and I'm going to take some black and burnt sienna, and I'm going to start right over here and put in the dark. Nice dark area right along here. It's going to be dark right up and underneath of the grab some black. I need some more black. Okay, I'm using black and burnt sienna to just get a dark, nice dark area right in here along the inside of the ring. It's going to be dark right up underneath of this little ridge here. Do this ridge right along the base. It's going to be nice and dark. Burnt sienna and black. Just putting in the basic colors right now. Right underneath of these leaves, I'm just going to make that nice and dark right there. Throw in some dark right above there too. A little bit of dark along this set of leaves or petals over here. And just add a little bit of dark right on the upper part of this little ring. It's kind of a raised ring around this pot. Put a little dark there. Then I'm going to pick up more burnt sienna than black. I'm going to add a little bit of orange to my burnt sienna as I start to move over, because I want this area to be a little brighter right in here. Adding a little bit of orange. Before I get away from the dark, I'm going to add a little ridge right along the bottom here. It's kind of the base of that pot right there. A little lighter color right there. Okay. Back to our orange and burnt sienna. And I'm blending that right in with our dark there. There's a couple of spots here that are going to be nice and bright, so I'm not putting a whole lot of Not putting any color yet. Orange and burnt sienna. Right over here, the orange and burnt sienna is going to be brighter. Edge of the pot right there. Add a little orange to this spot right here. Those are the basic colors. Now, there's a ring right at the top, right in here, there's a little ridge, that's the top edge. I'm going to take a little bit of orange and put right there. A little orange on this guy right here. And this guy right here. Then I'm going to take some yellow ochre and white. Yellow ochre and white. Right down the center of that orange. Right there. Over here, I'm going to add a little bit of alizarin crimson and kind of come this way because this is in shadow. Take it and then go right underneath of that ring right there. Little burnt or alizarin crimson right along the bottom. And yellow ochre and white to get that little highlight. Along the top edge. And take a little bit of my Naples yellow and white and put right there on that bright spot. Just plop it up there. A little bit right there too. Okay. Now wipe my brush and I just want to tickle the edges so that that blends right into the rest of the pot, the color there. Tickle the edges. I'm just using the very tip of my brush to just kind of smush those two colors together. You could even use your mop brush for this. Depends on how much paint you have on there. You don't want to overdo the blending. It's basic colors with a little bit of highlight. Now I'm going to do a little detail right along the top of this. I lost my shadow along the top of that ridge right there. I'm going to add that back in. Clean that up. Add a little bit more of the alizarin crimson along the bottom here. Maybe a little alizarin crimson along the bottom of this one. And then I'm going to take a brighter Naples yellow and white, and I'm going to add a little brighter highlight right there where the light is hitting this spot right there, and this right here, and a touch maybe up there. And I'm going to take a Naples yellow and white, plop that right in the center there, tickle that out a little bit more. I really want this to be a little brighter, and I want it to be kind of rough because this is a hammered copper pot, right? It's not supposed to be smooth. A little more orangey look right in here. Gives it a little more copper feel. Careful. We don't want to lose our glow here. A little more orange right in here to kind of show that curve right there. Darken this side up a little bit more. I want this to have a definite dark side. And coming down into our pot right there. This needs to be definitely dark. And to do this ring up here, we're going to start with just a little bit of the burnt sienna and orange, and then I'm going to take a little bit of alizarin crimson along the outside edge here, under there, inside edge here, and then I'm going to take that yellow ochre, outside edge here, inside edge here. Got to think about the light coming from this direction. A little bit of that orange color inside. And we're going to highlight it with a little bit of the Naples yellow and white. Outside edge, inside edge. I like that. And go back in if you lose that dark right in there. And dark on the outside here. And underneath, it's going to have a little bit of dark shadow as well. Brighten my highlights a little bit. the ochre and white a little bit more right there. A little spark there. A little more spark right there. We're going to have a flower coming down over the edges of all these. So the only other thing I want to do is I want to take my mop brush and I want to mop this edge. Kind of pull in. Careful you don't pull out and get it messy, but I want to mop this edge because I want this edge to be a little softer. That kind of indicates that it's when you have a soft edge, it recedes. When you have a sharp edge, it comes forward. So we want this edge over here to be a little sharper. I want to take a little bit of brighter orange. And round out that belly. And that's your basic copper pot. To start out our flowers, I'm going to go back to my 3/4 inch flat brush, and I'm going to fill in some of these leaf shapes because they are darker. I'll start with the very darkest green, and basically I'm just going to fill them in. We'll add some highlights and some low lights and other things, but for now, let's just make sure we have them placed using my larger brush. There's one over here, orange shadow. And I'm just using the dark green. And I'm going to put some dark green in between where there might be some There's a flower right here in the center, so right down there I'm going to add a little green right in there. There's a flower right there, or I mean a leaf right there. Let's put a little green up in here, right up and around here. Now, when you have a black canvas, you might not have to do this because there's going to be black back in there. but I want to darken around the flowers a little bit. So I'm going to add some dark green. Now I'm going to add some highlights, and what I do is I take my 3/4 inch flat brush, I load a little bit of green right on the tip. I put the tip right, or the edge of the brush right on starting at the tip, and I just pull in. Okay, let me get a little lighter, make my green a little lighter so you can see that. Push, pull in. Pull in. Right here's the center of the leaf, so I'm aiming back towards the center. Okay, just adding a little highlight. Might have to do these again because there's a flower that goes behind there. Light green on the tips. Let me show you again. Try to keep my hand out of the way. I'm sitting the brush right down on that tip, pushing in and towards the back of the flower. See, right there, right there. This one. See, I'm aiming that direction. There's a big flower or a leaf that hangs out over this one. One that hangs out right there. Up here, see, I'm putting my brush right on the tip, pulling in towards the center. See, I'm aiming it. That flip, I'm aiming towards the center and kind of towards the back. Right on the edge. This one over here is kind of in the shadows, so I'm not going to add too much highlight to it. Now I'm also going to take some blue. Let me take a little bit of blue, Prussian blue and white. Kind of right in my dirty green brush, because if I take that over on like this edge, I can pull that in maybe a little lighter as kind of a low light on some of these petals where they would be in shadow. It really adds an extra little bounce and depth, playing with the color. Because I want it to be kind of a bluish gray, especially this one over here that's in mostly shadow. See that? Okay, let's talk about these flowers. I'm going to start out with this same brush because I'm going to do an underpainting first. We have to think about these flowers in terms of where the sun is, or the light is coming from. Remember, it's coming from the top right going down. So we're going to start off by putting in an underpainting, and I want to think about how the dark and the lights are set up, okay, how they would be in here. For instance, if I took burnt sienna and black and just took my brush and just flipped some color on there, I would think about this as being the dark part of the flower. Burnt sienna and black. The light would be on this side of this flower. And you'll notice I'm letting this brush just kind of flip all over the place. because all I'm looking for here is texture and the underpainting color. It's going to be lighter on that side, so I'm not going to put my dark there. I'm going to put some dark down under here. Loosey-goosey. Loosey-goosey. Okay. See, light's coming from the top down, so, and so this side would be darker. This one down here is in shadow, so right next to the pot, I'm going to keep it fairly dark, and then I'm going to add, it might be a little too dark, wipe my brush, a little burnt sienna to that. This one hang down over the white there a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to switch to back to my filbert. Now I'm going to take burnt sienna and orange. This is going to be my mid-tone color. So I'm kind of dulling down the orange a little bit with some burnt sienna. And I'm using my brush, just flipping the color around again. I'm not thinking about the shape of anything or trying to make flowers yet. I'm just doing a base coat or an underpainting. What you're painting here is like the edges of all the flowers that are in this little hydrangea plant. We're not trying to create individual petals or flowers yet. We will do some of that. But for right now, I'm getting my orange and my burnt sienna in there, my mid-tone value. This one is kind of up there in the light more, right? When I come to the edge of the flower, I'm just going to go ahead and pull some of that green, let that green color come right in there. And next I'm going to take some Naples yellow. Let that be my highlight color. The color that comes in here when the light hits the petals. Again, I'm just putting in basic underpainting at this point. On this one, I might add a little bit of white to my Naples yellow because this is going to be a little brighter up here. This one doesn't get a whole lot because again it's in shadow. Okay, now for the last part of the flowers I'm going to take Naples yellow and white, and now I'm going to go in and I'm going to pick out some highlight some of these flowers and actually think about the petals that make up a hydrangea. Hydrangea is made up of all kinds of little individual flowers. So I'm going to go through here and just pick out a few, not many. A little bit of white. Into my Naples yellow. You could also take a little bit of, you can make these, if you want to make them more pink, just change your colors to some cad yellow or some cad red instead of the orange. I'm thinking about just the edges of petals that you might see. Yellow and white. Still keeping them very loose. Over here, I might take a little bit of alizarin crimson down in the shadow areas. To kind of give the indication of a couple of petals, not many. Let my brush go back to my Naples yellow and white. A little bit brighter highlights on some of these. It's more of a straight white and a dirty brush. A little thicker paint when I'm doing these last petals. Make sure your petals are flipping different directions. Your brush can do that for you. These petals down in here that are in the dark, we can take a little bit of our blue, that dark blue mixture, and we can add a little petal. indication of petals to these down in here. Just here and there. And that's pretty much how we do our flowers. If you want to add a little bit of pink tone in there, you can take a little bit of cad red and white. You can add some pinkish tones in amongst your flowers. That's kind of neat. Cad red and white. I'm adding it kind of in the mid-tone area. Cad red and white gives you kind of a orangey color, so it's a kind of a mid-tone color to add in amongst our orange. Once you get that done, I would step back and look at your painting, see if you need to add any more lights or darks. Do you need any more highlights on any of your flowers? Any more highlights on your lace? Got a little extra emphasis here and there. And then I would call it done. I really enjoyed painting this one. I hope you did too. And I hope you're coming back and paint with me again. Thanks.